Is the world changing? It certainly is, but our world has always been in a constant state of change. So why does it suddenly matter? Simple answer. Because the change underway is fundamental. The scale of the current transformation in the global order is nearly unprecedented. Even from a conservative perspective, what we are witnessing today may be the most significant change since 1991, the year the Soviet Union collapsed and the Cold War ended. From a more progressive perspective, this transformation has the potential to be the most monumental change in human history. Many of us have probably already felt this change. If you have not yet felt it, it simply means that you are standing where the wave of change has not yet reached. But the change will eventually find you wherever you are. Such is the magnitude of the ongoing transformation taking place in the global order. International regimes are in flux, economic relations are changing, and even globalization, once considered almost irreversible, has slowed down to say the least. The international rules and norms that prevailed just a few years ago are now outdated, including the liberal discourses and arguments that once opposed them. These changes represent a departure from the trends of the past 3 decades. It is a dramatic shift in direction. In my opinion, there are at least 3 major causes driving this fundamental change. The first and foremost is the global redistribution of power. Every international order, at least the established ones, relies on a stable balance of power. For nearly 3 decades, we have lived under an international order in which, for the first time, there existed a global hegemon. The United States reigned over the unipolar world. Now that era is changing. What will emerge after the transition period remains uncertain. Nations like Russia are determined to return the world to an era of great powers, openly advocating for multipolarity. For Russia, this is such an important national mission that President Putin himself mentions it at every opportunity. In China, some commentators argue that the United States and China will establish a bipolarity similar to the Cold War era with the United States and the Soviet Union. They contend that while there is still a power gap between the United States and China, China's lead over other great powers dwarfs that gap. Thus, just as the Soviet Union, which never really overpowered the United States during the Cold War, was able to create a bipolar world with the United States, China could do the same in the future. Conversely, some commentators in the United States contend that even with the decline of its global hegemony, the so-called unipolar moment has not ended. They argue that the power differential between the United States and other great powers, including China, remains substantial, with no real peer capable of truly challenging the US global dominance. However, there is widespread agreement that the global hegemony of the United States is being eclipsed. It follows that change in the global system and global order is inevitable. The only uncertainty lies in the extent of the forthcoming changes. The second cause is the change in the international economic order. The international order that has prevailed since the end of the Cold War is commonly referred to as the Liberal International Order, or the LIO. One of the main pillars of the LIO is the principle of free trade, which has long been a cornerstone of international economic relations. Free trade has enjoyed widespread support from both economic and political theories, bolstered by robust historical precedents and justifications. Despite compelling counterarguments from learned opponents, mainstream thought has largely been dominated by the legacies of great minds such as Immanuel Kant, Adam Smith, and David Ricardo. Free trade was believed not only to optimize global economic welfare, but also to foster international peace by cultivating economic interdependence among nations. However, this principle no longer commands the same reverence on the international stage. Since around 2017, and certainly by 2022, the United States has openly challenged the dominance of free trade as the prevailing norm in the global economy. It is worth noting that the LIO, including the emphasis on free trade, owed much of its establishment to the desires of the United States than the global hegemon. With the United States now shifting away from this stance, the era of free trade is waning, to say the least. The consequence is a widespread fragmentation of global supply chains and the potential segregation of markets. National security concerns are increasingly superseding economic efficiency, not merely as an occasional exception, but as the prevailing norm. The third cause is the shifting perception of liberal ideas within international community. Given the prolonged dominance of the LIO, or the Liberal International Order, the liberal ideas and causes have traditionally been at the forefront of global ideological discourse. Even during the era of globalization, liberal ideals faced resistance from certain cultures that viewed them as foreign or corrupt. Many nations perceived Western promotion of liberal ideals, particularly by the United States, as a guise for interfering in their domestic affairs. The ideological battleground often manifested in clashes between human rights and national sovereignty, or between liberalism and nationalism. Despite this, numerous countries, including those under autocratic rule, acknowledged, at least in theory, the validity of liberal principles. They recognized the importance of human rights, individual freedom, environmental protection, and more, but passively weighed these against their own cultural values and countered Western criticisms with relativistic arguments. But this is changing. Many nations are increasingly vocal in challenging Western liberal ideals, claiming that they are misaligned with their own values or even downright flawed. The West currently lacks an effective response to these ideological challenges. These ideological differences are significant. Cultural differences have historically fueled major international conflicts, and ideological divergence hinders the international community's ability to reach consensus. The international community's inability to reach an agreement, in turn, undermines multilateralism, which is essentially a system of democracy at the international level. As a result, international institutions are increasingly failing to fulfill their mandates, while misunderstandings between nations continue to escalate. Of the causes I have outlined, the first is a matter of observable reality, while the second and third are issues of legitimacy. In essence, not only are the power dynamics underpinning the current global order shifting, but also long-standing international norms and principles are rapidly losing their normative force. These causes are not independent. Rather, they are interrelated and mutually reinforcing. The cumulative effect of these factors is likely to be a slowing or even suspension of globalization, increased fragmentation among nations, and heightened regional tensions and conflicts. In addition, we can expect a resurgence of nationalism and traditional values in opposition to liberal ideals, both domestically and internationally. In layman's terms, less trade, less travel, heightened insecurity, increased instances of conflict and war, and amplified disagreements on a global scale. Now, let us shift our perspective a bit and look at this concept from a different angle. In my view, the current situation can also be interpreted as a clash between our inherent instincts and our aspirational ideals. Our natural inclinations drive us to seek relative advantages in security and economic gain, leading us to succumb to the primal notion of the war of all against all. Like gravity, this innate nature exerts its influence throughout all stages of human history. It is an ever-present force. We may be able to resist it momentarily, but we cannot defy it indefinitely. Hence, the principle of realism will always remain influential. At the same time, however, humanity as a collective entity harbors a persistent yearning for lasting peace. From time to time, especially after major catastrophes such as world wars, there is a concerted effort among nations to forge a universal framework for peace and prosperity. This inclination must stem from our innate nature as social animals, driving us to strive for a more harmonious and advanced civilization. After the World War I, nations sought to establish a unified international peacekeeping system. Although this attempt failed, the subsequent World War II further compelled the construction of a more robust international framework to ensure peace. Following the Cold War, the United States spearheaded the development of an elaborated global order that built on the post-World War II system. In essence, the current international order is the product of two hot world wars and one Cold World War. It represents an evolution shaped by the concerted efforts of all participants. Nobody seeks the total dissolution of the prevailing global framework. Make no mistake, this sentiment is shared even by revisionist powers such as China or Russia, which seek to disrupt the current balance of power and end unipolarity. However, any effort to upset the current balance of power runs the risk of inadvertently bringing down the entire system and throwing us back into the era of the lawless jungle. But here is the silver lining. For the first time in history, humanity is equipped with sufficient knowledge, understanding, and historical precedents that might, just might, guide us through this challenging transition period without catastrophic consequences. In fact, such knowledge, understanding, and historical precedents could even help us shape a post-transition global order that is more constructive and ideal than ever before. And that is precisely what this channel is all about. My goal is to provide contextual insights into various issues that have not only shaped our world in the past, but will continue to influence it in the days to come. While I will begin by delving into the realm of international order, just because I recently published a 656-page book on the subject in Korean, my scope will eventually expand far beyond international relations or geopolitics. The ultimate objective of this channel is to foster a deeper understanding of our intricate world. Hopefully, I will learn as I craft the content and you will benefit from watching it. And who knows, with a better and deeper understanding of our world, maybe together we can make a positive contribution to the future course of our world. As the great Persian poet Rumi once said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." We may be small individually, but together we are capable of making a significant impact. If you resonate with my mission, please show your support by clicking like and subscribe. Your attention fuels my motivation, and I will return the favor with more and better content. Okay, that wraps up my first video on introduction to my channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.